Hello all, and welcome back to Midnite Movie Reviews. I'm Vincent,
I'm Raven Shadow.
and tonight we have finally watched the 2014 Michael Keaton film, Birdman.
Yeah, this was actually suggested to us by Marshall Lawless, our lovely, beautiful bass player of Midnight Massacre. Big Michael Keaton fan, so yeah, and we're big Michael Keaton fans too. So we decided to watch this. I had seen this movie 5 years ago when I was a student at Radford University. I took a few film classes, and I remember one of the ones in one of my classes we watched this movie, and I didn't remember anything about it. I actually slept through it mostly, not the movie's fault. I slept in that class a lot. But anyway, we finally decided, to just go ahead and revisit it and do a review on it. I'm getting a sort of a brand new, fresh take on it. He hadn't seen it at all, so I guess getting into it. So obviously, as we said, it stars Michael Keaton, and he plays an aging actor reaching the end of his career, who at one point in time had a thriving career playing a superhero type character called Birdman. But those days are long gone, and he's reached a point now where he has to sort of figure out how to stay relevant. It's very important to him that he feel like his life means something, that he feel accomplished, and he doesn't feel that way right now. So he decides to write, direct, and star in his own Broadway play based on a book that he likes. And throughout the process of putting this play on, which is essentially the entire runtime of this movie, he eventually has to sort of battle not only ensuring that the play takes place and goes on as planned, but also dealing with personal demons and the like in the middle of everything. So anyways.
So yeah, right off the bat, before we get into any spoilers, it's definitely it's a stranger movie.
Yeah.
At first, the first time I heard of it, when Marshall brought it up the other day, suggesting that we watch it, I remember hearing about it, but I didn't remember anything about it. When he said Birdman, I'm like, I'm gonna watch a superhero movie, and I'm like, oh, well, why are we gonna review that?
Right.
And then after he explained what it was about, I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll give that a shot. And it is very, very interpretive.
Yeah, I will say I haven't quite seen another movie really like it. It is unique. It won the Academy Award that year, I assume 2014, for Best Picture. So it's a movie.
Probably 2015.
Yeah, maybe that. Yeah, it was released in 2014, so 2015 may have been when it won the award. But it's a movie that's gotten a lot of praise over the years. From a filmmaking standpoint, specifically, which I guess we should go ahead and point out the obvious thing. This movie is filmed to look like it's all one long take, one long shot. Of course, we know that it's not, but it's made to look that way. And there's positives and negatives that go along with that. And we'll get into that. We're gonna go into our positives and negatives specifically, but that's the first thing, obviously, that you're gonna notice about this movie.
So yeah, before we get into any spoilers, definitely if you are a fan of Michael Keaton, and this is actually an all-star film. I mean, we have Michael Keaton, Zach Galifianakis, Edward Norton, of course Emma Stone, Naomi Watts.
Yeah, there's tons of A-list names in this, and that's one thing I had forgotten about. I remember Keaton was in it, but it wasn't until watching it just now where I remembered, oh, this has everybody else.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're a fan of that, and just it's a very, I'm not going to say a dialogue-centric film, but it's
very character-driven.
Yeah.
There is lots and lots of dialogue. That's pretty much how you sort of figure out. I mean, you figure out all the relationships between these characters. Everything is, a lot of the information that you digest as the movie goes on is given through dialogue between the characters.
Yes. So I definitely do recommend watching it. So, yes, without further ado, from this point, spoilers here on out, and we'll get into the actual meat and bones of this film.
Yeah. Well, I'll say. See, where do I really start?
I guess we start just as we started with the single shot.
Yeah, yeah. So that's definitely an interesting approach. It's not a new idea. So some of you film fans might know there's a film called Rope that Alfred Hitchcock made back in, was it the 1960s something?
The exact year.
Yeah. And of course that film wasn't all one shot either. That's what Hitchcock wanted. And of course back then they didn't have enough film to shoot that long. So he had to find a way to sort of hide the cuts because there had to be some. But
now much easier to do with the technology today.
Right, yeah. But that definitely was the intention, to make it all look like one shot. And as far as I know, that has been accomplished by now. I've heard of some foreign films that are entirely one shot. So it's not a new concept. This movie does it a little differently. It does something new with the one take shot. Obviously you know that it's not. And you'll know what I mean, like when you watch the movie, and you're going to be able to tell there's no way this is one shot, just from where particular characters will end up.
Yeah, I mean, it's multiple settings, and I guess talking about the reasoning of why
why did they shoot it this way?
Yeah, I don't really know. I assumed at first that it was because this entire thing is following Michael Keaton's character. And like this is all going on within his life. A lot of this is in his head. He has this internal dialogue with the Birdman character, which we'll discuss a little more. But then it goes on to other characters too and showcases them.
It was distracting for us. This method of filming it this way was distracting. Like I said, we don't know exactly why they chose to shoot it that way. We have sort of our theories, and it's done in a really cool way. It sort of does give it almost like a otherworldly, kind of dreamlike quality, which may have been what they were going for. But overall, it was just a little bit distracting. And to his point, I kind of felt the same. When we're following Michael Keaton's character, who I'm forgetting the character's name. It's Regan.
Yeah, he's actually just credited as Birdman, so I don't remember his actual name.
It's just so easy to call him Michael Keaton. But anyway, we'll be following him, and sorry, and then at certain points, we'll just sort of start to follow someone else, and then they'll interact with other characters, and we'll learn a little bit of backstory about them and sort of the dynamic going on between some of these characters. And it almost felt like just too much information to process and too many points to correlate as far as like, okay, what's this person's relationship to this person, and why is that person there? And another thing too, with the long take approach, it definitely gave the movie sort of a fast-paced sort of feel to it, and the dialogue really kind of added to that feeling for me as far as how fast everything was moving, because these people talk quickly. There's a lot of dialogue, just people talking and people saying things. It's a very chaotic sort of feel to it at all times, which I think, again, probably what they were going for. For what reason specifically, we don't really know. But the dialogue's very fast. There was a lot of moments where we kind of had to sort of stop and rewind because we couldn't quite catch what someone said because things were said so fast or not quite audible enough for us. So that's kind of the biggest glaring negative, we think, to the method of filming it this way. However, it was done in a very beautiful way. The cinematography, and we noticed this the longer the movie went on, the cinematography is great. There's a few shots, especially towards the end, that just look absolutely gorgeous. And to be able to have that good looking of a movie with the camera moving as much as it does, technically speaking, from
pretty much everything's on a Steadicam rig too. I didn't notice any still shots in this really.
I don't think I did either. And other than when it's just holding on to characters while they're speaking, there's not really a lot of of the camera sitting still. And so for it to look that good with some of the effects, and the effects looked really good. The effects looked really good. So visually, the movie is great. And I assume that had a lot to do with why it won the Academy Award. So it was pulled off very well, but just speaking strictly from a storytelling perspective, we just found it a little distracting.
Now, something interesting is the title of the movie is Birdman or The Unexpected Virtue of Ignorance, which I don't know if it was supposed to be a callback to the Stanley Kubrick classic Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, which is a very interesting story behind that title. And I don't know if there was intentionally some callback to that.
Yeah, I mean, there very well could be, but just within the span of the movie, I never really noticed anything to make me think there would be a correlation.
They do recite that line, but I don't, like, that line is said in the movie, but I just don't know, like, why. I mean, it seems a little too close to that, but there's nothing else that would bring that up to me.
Right.
So another key element of this film is that Michael Keaton has superpowers. Maybe.
Right, yeah.
So it's brought up from the very beginning that he is able to move objects and
Levitate.
That's the very opening. One of the opening shots, he's levitating, and of course, when they're going through rehearsal with this actor he doesn't like, a light fixture falls on the actor's head, and he says, "I did that," and it's never quite clear though. I think it leaves it up to, going through the film, that all these powers are in his head, because we noticed that there's a scene where he gets locked out.
Right.
And
his rope's caught in the door. He can't get the door back open to get back to the stage area.
And we said, why don't he just use his powers?
Yeah, so there's so many moments. I mean, it sets up early on that he does have superpowers. He can move things with his mind. And then as we're talking about, there was a rehearsal scene where, and I don't really know how Broadway works, but just judging from what I'm getting off of this movie, there's lots and lots of rehearsals before they do the official show. And they call them previews, where they'll just act out I assume the entire play just for practice sake and figure out what they want to change and things like that. And there's an audience for these things too.
Like in the producers,
right?
They have
which I haven't seen.
Yeah, they have their, essentially it's like an opening night, but that's what judges if this is going to be a flop or if it's going to be actually make it to Broadway.
Yeah. So during one of these nights, he's having a relatively rough time, and he goes outside to smoke a cigarette, and he locks himself out, and his rope's caught in the door, and he's trying to get back in, and we're like, why doesn't he? If he's got powers, he can move things with his mind. Why doesn't he just, he can use the force. Why not just open the doors back up and walk through? And he has to take the robe off and run in his underwear all the way around the side of the building into just a crowd of people waiting outside, and goes back in through the front door to get back in. And so that's when we're like, okay, could the superpower thing just be in his head? And the movie sort of answered that for me towards the end, but the very ending, and then now that you mention it, that callback to the stage light falling on the guy's head, those two instances make me like sort of wonder a little bit.
Yeah, and of course, we'll get into the ending in here shortly, but it's just so much that's up to interpretation of why is it, like, film logic, I guess, of why can he use his powers here and not here? Okay, well, maybe because this is in the real world and everything else is still in his head. But
because, I mean, you could take the argument that it all is in his head, because anytime he uses any of these superpowers, he's alone. Other than the moment when he destroys his dressing room, and Zach Galifianakis' character, which is I believe called Jake, he comes in and sees the room destroyed. He doesn't see him throwing things around with his mind, but we can assume maybe he just did that physically, but in his head he saw himself doing this telepathically because he's got the Birdman character up here in his mind.
So, naturally, this movie is very meta in a sense.
Oh,
that,
definitely.
you know,
A lot of obvious stuff.
yeah, I mean, of course, Michael Keaton was known for playing Green Lantern.
I think it was, he did Forrest Gump, wasn't it?
No, there was a superhero though.
Oh, yeah. What did he...
Oh, Robin, yeah.
That's right, yeah. He was in, he did, what was that one? It was the Batman, it was an animated thing, I think he was Robin. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, so, of course, you know, Michael Keaton, he had this career building up throughout the 80s, you know, in Mr. Mom, Beetlejuice, and then...
Multiplicity. Well, that was, I think, was a little after the 80s, but...
Yeah, and then, of course, after his role in the Batman films, it's just kind of like his popularity kind of dipped off, because I guess Tim Burton found Johnny Depp at that point, and...
Oh yeah, once Burton and Depp got, you know, basically married, it was
that was it.
That's the way it was going to be.
No more Michael Keaton, and
Yeah.
they actually make a reference when he's talking to his ex-wife. He says how, did you know that Farrah Fawcett and Michael Jackson died on the exact same day? And I actually do remember that. That is true. And
I did know that, but I had 100% forgotten until that was brought up.
And of course,
which is a point. But that's the point they're trying to make.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Farrah Fawcett was, you know, just this huge sex symbol throughout the 70s. And Michael Jackson, you know, had a huge career throughout the 70s and 80s. But then, you know, some things may or may not have happened. And his popularity kind of changed to infamy for a while. But at the same time, they both died on the same day, and Michael Jackson just had such a more well-known career and known life at that point.
He was a larger-than-life figure.
Yeah, people forgot about Farrah Fawcett, and he's afraid of that. And he actually makes the remark, he's telling the story about being on a plane with George Clooney.
Yeah, he said he's sitting two seats behind George Clooney, and the plane goes through this really, really vicious storm, and everybody's very scared. And obviously, we're led to believe the plane landed just fine, but the next day in the newspaper, there was a mention of it.
No, he's saying he's worrying about what it's going to say in the paper when his daughter reads, George Clooney survives plane crash or something.
Right. I can't remember. I thought it was he said that there was a newspaper article.
I think it was just in his head. He was just.
That's
what he was worried about.
It might have been. Either way, the point is still the same. He's relating his career, the character's career at that point, to George Clooney, in the same way that he's relating Farrah Fawcett to Michael Jackson.
But
because
also,
if this plane were to crash, they would remember George Clooney was on it, but would they remember I was on it?
And at the same time, you know, after. That was Batman and Robin, right? George Clooney.
Yeah.
So
well, Keaton didn't do Batman Forever either.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying Batman and Robin was George Clooney.
Right.
You know, and George Clooney's career actually took off even more after that. And you know, he was on ER, of course, for years during that period, but his career took off to where he's still a very well-known name, and Michael Keaton is, you know, to non-fans, he's still kind of.
Yeah,
on the back burner.
You know him for those few things he did before, but he's not necessarily a name that comes up very often anymore. Which is sad because he's a great actor, and ultimately, you know, if you want to move into positives, my top positive for the film is the acting. I pretty much, you know, although it was kind of hard to follow some of the stuff, all the performances looked really good and really genuine, especially Michael Keaton. Yeah, he wasn't bad at all, and I didn't think there was anybody that was really bad in this.
No, positives for the film. I would definitely say the latter half of the film. Once I don't now even looking back, I can't remember what scene. Oh, it was the scene where he's having this battle with his inner monologue of Birdman. He destroys his dressing room. From then on out, the movie takes a much more serious approach, and when he becomes a star by
he goes viral because of that video.
Yeah, walking out in the streets in his underwear.
Yeah,
which is what he wanted to be relevant again.
Yeah, but he didn't want to do it that way.
Yeah,
because he had that conversation with his daughter about
how he didn't even have social media.
Yeah, so I'm out here trying to create art, and all your generation cares about is going viral, and you care about your Twitter and all that sort of stuff. But I'm trying to. This is my career. This is something a serious thing I'm trying to make.
And so, I love how the story becomes this. It's very sad, especially if we're thinking about it as Michael Keaton in real life. Not that he's ever been seen walking around in his underwear that I know of.
It's very hard. I'll tell you, it was very awkward for me to see Michael Keaton running around in his underwear. Mm-hmm. Just to see him without a shirt was just somehow weird to me.
And knowing what...
He's got this iconic status, and just seeing him running around in his underwear, especially at this stage in his career, as old as he is now, just felt really weird.
And again, acting was spot on. This great acting.
Yeah, Galifianakis was great. He's being his normal comedic self. The character's totally believable. I like Edward Norton in everything. I've never seen Edward Norton act badly ever. And
and just the Michael Keaton's character in general is, he's someone you genuinely do care about. I don't know if we were to show this movie to someone who didn't know anything about who Michael Keaton was in real life, I don't know if it would have quite the same effect.
I think you could still follow it, but you wouldn't get some of the stuff.
Yeah. And so we genuinely, especially if you're a fan of Michael Keaton, it makes you especially care for him in this. Mm-hmm. I love just certain little elements in it. There's a few things I didn't quite get, but I thought it was kind of clever, such as how the soundtrack for much of the film is mostly drums.
Yeah.
And there's two shots that it just shows the street performer playing drums, and he's playing the soundtrack.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let me ask you this. Obviously he's a relatable character. You're meant to be sympathetic towards Michael Keaton's character, but isn't he kind of like a little bit of a pretentious a-hole? A little bit? There's certain things he does and says throughout the movie that almost kind of make you not really want to be on his side. He's not an evil, bad person or anything like that, but he is very self-absorbed.
I just think he's out of touch.
He's out of touch, but he also has that bad relationship with his family. He's divorced. His daughter doesn't really have a great relationship with him, and there's hints that the reason it may be like that is because he has been so self-absorbed on keeping his career relevant. And then going as far as to, again, if he did make that stage light fall on that guy, could have killed him, and he doesn't care. He's just like, yeah, we just need somebody else. There's decisions that he makes throughout the film, plus references to decisions he has made in the past, where you do kind of, although you feel for him, you see his goals and you want him to achieve them, you're still not quite, I'm not sure if he's really like that good of a guy. He very cares deeply about his art, certainly, and he does care about his family. There's a moment where he apologizes and says, hey, I should have been there, I should have did more. But he is self-absorbed, though.
Well, I don't really see it as being self-absorbed. I see it more of just that fear. We ourselves are in the public eye.
Yeah. To some extent.
Yeah, in our music, and of course here I have a few other shows here on YouTube I'm trying to get out there, and it does make you kind of wonder, well, years down the road, are we still going to be remembered? Mm-hmm. And we want that legacy.
And that's a reasonable fear, but I think where his character went wrong was that he let that become more important than some of the real things in life, like family and friendships and things like that.
Yeah, it just depends where your devotions are, because we can also say how the woman who was going to review the play just had this personal vendetta against because she thought he was just pretentious, someone who wanted to be, who
Yeah.
thought they could be an artist.
And he does make a good argument for himself, and you know, and he does tell her, you know, like, you just label everything. You have your opinions, but you write your little critical review for the paper or the magazine or whatever it is, and you just call everything a name. You just label everything. You use words like,
Yeah, just all these pretentious words. Just,
yeah, you know. But at the end of the day, he says, you know, you're not risking anything here. It's easy for you to sit down and write those words. This is my career. This is my life.
I think
You don't see the beauty in what we're trying to create here. You just see something, have an opinion, and move on. You're not sacrificing anything to be in my position.
I think Michael Keaton has the best of intentions in this film.
Oh, he certainly has good intentions.
Just not the
He's not a bad guy.
just not the right methods, maybe, because
Right.
he is going into bankruptcy, and I mean he has spent his last dime.
Goes as far as to refinance his summer home.
Yeah, just to
come up with more money.
just to make this play work, because he just wants this is his last chance.
Yeah.
He just wants to be remembered for something.
Yeah, and I think he wants to be remembered for more than just being a comic book hero. And I think he sort of sees, you know, this movie, even when this came out in 2014, the Marvel, DC cinematic universes, all these huge blockbuster comic book movies were big then, as they are still now. And I think he's sort of a character that sees all of that and doesn't really want to be lumped into that. I mean, he's grateful for his career. He's glad that he had that popularity, but he really wants something a little more. He wants to be taken seriously. He wants to actually create art.
And I do love, there's a little breakaway commentary when it's toward the end of the film, and this is, I guess it's up to interpretation, most likely all in his head,
Yeah.
when Birdman becomes personified rather than just a voice in his head, and he's saying, you know, the people don't want...
Yeah, they don't want your artsy bullshit.
Yeah, they don't want all these talky, you know, emotional stuff.
They want explosions.
They want explosions, action, superheroes, which is what a lot of today's audience does want. I mean, it's, you know, they want your popcorn movies, your feel-good movies, something you can turn your brain off and just sit and watch. You know, watch all these Marvel, you know, just 15 Marvel characters going out fighting one guy and just...
And Birdman's telling him sort of too, like, this is who you actually are. You know, like this is what you were supposed to do. You know, and it could, when he, and I guess we can get into sort of how this happens, but as he's floating above the city, flying towards the venue, towards Broadway, there's that line where Birdman says, "This is where you belong, above all of them." You know, like this is sort of your spot. You don't need this artsy thing you're trying to do. You can just be Birdman and come back and do this again, because that's what the people want.
And, I mean, the ending of this is... I mean, it does go into some strange territory. After, of course, there's a scene where it's... I guess assumed that he did try to kill himself.
Not quite sure how to interpret that little suicide attempt there. I wasn't sure if it was just him trying to, his last final desperate attempt to make the play memorable, regardless of what people may have thought of it. It was his just way of, you know, kind of sinking with the ship sort of idea. Or if it was somehow in rebellion or sorrow for, I guess, with the Birdman telling him, you know, you can be a superhero, and this is what your spot is, and this is where you belong. That's actually what sparks him to go back to the venue to complete the play. But it's sort of in the face of what Birdman was telling him a little bit. So I'm not sure exactly what was supposed to be going through his head when he decided to shoot himself with a real gun.
But post shooting himself, what was I supposed to get from that?
I'm not really. I mean, clearly, we have to assume he was attempting suicide.
No. I'm talking the Spider-Man dancing on stage.
Oh, I don't know. Could that have been like somehow kind of trying to marry the ideas together of like you can have like superheroes and you can have action, but you can have art there too. And because you see Spider-Man and Iron Man even
I don't remember seeing Iron Man.
You see Iron Man for like a split second, and there's a sequence which obviously it's not really happening. I can imagine maybe he's dreaming it while he's in the hospital or something like that, or in a coma. But they're dancing around on stage on Broadway, so I maybe was wondering if that was a way of...
Well, because the other actress says something how like, when I envisioned debuting on Broadway, I never thought of seeing dancing reindeers on stage.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that's kind of like, well, you know, here we're seeing a Broadway play, but we're seeing Spider-Man and Iron Man dancing on stage. So.
I can maybe interpret it that way.
That's a good thought.
Yeah, trying to say that, you know, you can sort of have both, and maybe he was a little bit jaded in thinking that he needed to 100% abandon those sorts of roles to try to make this strictly art film. It could have been a way of saying, you know, you can be both. You can be an artist and a superhero. That's maybe. I don't know.
Then, of course, our very final scene goes right back to, well, okay, does he have powers or not? I mean...
Yeah, I don't know. Those are the two... I'm totally willing to buy that the powers were 100% in his head, other than the two instances of the end, when his daughter looks out the window, and I can only imagine she's seeing him fly, and then when the light falls on the guy's head at the beginning, because that happened. There's no doubt about that. That happened in the real world of the film. Whether or not he caused it, I guess is up for debate.
Now, as for his daughter watching him fly around the city, that could have been the last thing that's going through his head is, you know,
yeah,
before he touched down.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and say that he had no superpowers. I'm just going to say he imagines that he does.
Yes, I mean, it's very, very evident that he's probably a very sick man. There's probably some mental issues there.
I think the superpowers could be a metaphor for how he sees himself. Because there's moments where he'll be alone in a room and move something with his mind, and that internal monologue of the Birdman character will say, they don't even know what you're capable of. So that could be him in his own head struggling to get the public to see how good he is. And so the superpowers that he seems to have are just related to something special, something unique he knows he's capable of doing that nobody else can do, but no one can see it. He just hasn't gotten there yet. He's struggling to get people to see this art that he knows he can create. So maybe the powers are kind of a metaphor for that in a way.
Okay. So before we get into negatives, is there any other positive you have?
Positives for me mostly are really just the acting, the cinematography, everything from a technical perspective. The camera work, you could tell, took probably lots of time to set up, lots of rehearsal for some of these shots. There was a lot of effort into presenting the film the way that they did and make it look good. So that and the acting together are definitely a positive. The story itself is a positive. I think it's a good script, but I guess ultimately what I'm trying to say is I see what they're trying to do and I respect it, but the execution of it didn't quite land for me, and that's where I get into negatives.
Okay. So I guess negative number one, as we've already begun to mention, is the execution of this single shot film that in a way I guess another reason that it could have been single shot, I think we kind of touched on, discussed before our review, was that it confuses the passage of time, which could be intentional because it's like, okay, maybe Michael Keaton's let time get away from him. You know, I mean, that can very well happen. I mean, years go by, you don't really realize that, look at this year, we're already in August now.
Yeah.
And feels like nothing's got done.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I just feel like it took me out of the story, because I love long shot cuts. Especially like in Tarantino films, in Martin Scorsese films, the Goodfellas scene.
Right.
One of the greatest shot scenes of all time.
Yeah, that's the go-to.
Yeah, and I love it. in those 1 to 2 minute scenes. An
Right.
entire movie, it gets distracting after a while, and
It gets distracting when you're trying to tell as big a story as this seems to be, and with multiple characters, with all kinds of different things going on. That's where I think where you're getting into where it feels a little distracting. Like the one take thing could work. It's a good idea on paper, but trying to execute it with this type of story, you do feel a little bit lost because you're trying to follow so many different things.
and the dialogue was just so fast spoken that, I mean, I was just zoning out through half this movie during, like, especially the first half of the movie. There's just so much dialogue going on at once. I mean, it's just constant speaking, not taking any breaths. I lost track of what they're saying, and I was hoping, like, well, I hope this doesn't come back up again, because I have no idea what he's talking about right now. I'm just kind of lost.
Right. And maybe that could have been intentional to the point of just his life being as chaotic as it was, always being around these people and in his office on the stage, just trying everything to pull this play off. It could have been trying to speak to that, to try to get you into that chaotic sort of mindset that he's in. But just as a viewer of the movie, if they were going for that, I don't know if they were. If they were, I get it. But again, just as a viewer of the movie, it was distracting.
And as for the characters themselves, again, acting spot on in this film. Great acting. I don't think any of them done a bad job acting in this. But I did not care the slightest bit about any character besides Michael Keaton.
I'm kind of in the same boat there.
Yeah.
I liked Zach Galifianakis' character for that sort of...
His was the only one that I kind of enjoyed him being there.
Yeah, comedic relief as he would do.
Yeah.
And he's good.
Emma Stone, I did not care about her character. I didn't care about...
Edward Norton.
Yeah, Edward Norton.
Yeah.
And I love him as an actor, and I thought he'd done a great job in this film. I just did not care about his character, the side plot with him and Emma Stone. Didn't care a thing about that.
I didn't either. I think there is sort of a kernel of a good idea in some of these other characters. They just don't feel like they really go anywhere unless there's something that's going over our heads. Again, Zach Galifianakis' character being a supporting character, that was fine because you understand what he's there for. But Emma Stone playing the daughter, there were moments with her where I thought, this dynamic, this father-daughter dynamic could really go somewhere. And I think they tried to do something with it at the end. I'm just not quite sure what it was, other than there's the moment where she puts him down and basically tells him, you're sitting here struggling to be relevant, but the truth is you're just not. Nobody cares about you anymore. Just like, you're living in a world full of people that want to be relevant, but you're just another guy. You did something once upon a time, but your time has passed and you're done. And at the end, there's that moment where she sees him floating away out of the window, so that ties back to maybe that's the arc. She does finally see that her dad really is something special. But
Which Edward Norton kind of calls her out on it anyways. Like, what did he do so bad? It's like, he wasn't there. It's like, okay.
it's
It's not that he just tried to make up for it by making me think how special I was. Like, okay, well, you are. And that's kind of how I'm feeling. Like, okay, you're just spoiled, and you're saying that it's all about him. Well, you're making it all about you.
Yeah, that's kind of why she's not, like, there's a kernel of something good there, but it's just not as interesting to me as I think it was supposed to be.
I just didn't care about anybody else in this.
And I loved Edward Norton's character. I really liked the character up until the point where it just kind of, the movie just kind of lets him go.
And that's like halfway through, he just becomes an actor on stage at that point. He's not...
It does, yeah, it sort of builds up something there with him, but the arc doesn't ever feel completed to me. I don't even know if there is an arc there. I mean, he's a pretentious asshole who is in love with art, but he's willing to, not necessarily like hurt anybody or anything like that, but he's willing to go to extremes to get himself into character or to make things on stage look real, to the point where he's in bed with one of the other actors on stage, and he wants, the idea is that they're going to be having sex so that Keaton's character, will come on stage and shoot one of them, presumably. And he's under the sheets before the curtains draw back, and he tells her, let's actually have sex. This will make this real.
Yeah, he's essentially almost raping her.
He basically rapes her on stage. Well, he doesn't really rape her, but that's what he's trying to do. And then after it's over, she runs backstage, all distraught, very upset, where she runs into another character Michael Keaton, who apparently had not an affair because he's divorced, but some sort of a relationship with this woman, believes she's pregnant. That whole relationship between her and Keaton's character to me meant nothing.
Yeah, and I didn't care about either of the other actresses' characters.
And then they're in the dressing room making each other feel important, and then they decide to start making out. Like, why? Like, I don't, and it never really is important again. It never brings that up again.
And there's a lot of other, like, I remember there's a few other elements I can't think of right now, but like it brought it up and like, okay, well, maybe we're going somewhere with that, and it never brings these things up again.
No, and then Norton's character, after you see him basically being willing to rape someone so that his performance looks better. I mean, you're going to have all your opinions about him and everything, but then he ends up on the rooftop with Emma Stone's character, and you kind of realize that he's maybe not that bad of a guy because she makes a move on him and basically tells him that she's interested in, messing around, having sex or whatever, and he just shoots her down. And then after that, I don't remember him being important ever again.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and again, when you're dealing with a movie that's everything's supposed to look like one shot, and you have all these different elements going on, and you're going to introduce us to all these different characters, as distracting as it was for us anyway, for it to be executed like that, and then you don't pay anything off with it, that's the biggest glaring negative for me. Overall, I liked the movie. I think I would recommend it. I think it's worth watching. If you're a fan of Michael Keaton, if you're a fan of sort of these artistically done sort of films, how exactly do I really say what kind of a movie it is?
I mean, it's just it's technically just a character drama.
Yeah,
but it has some supernatural elements to it, as in the otherworldly type superhero movies. Like,
if you're into character driven, if you like Michael Keaton and you like dialogue heavy, character driven sorts of stories, I think you'll like it. I think it's a good movie. It's worth watching. However, I will never watch this movie again.
Yeah, now you say if you like dialogue-driven movies, I don't think you're gonna like it because, like I said, the dialogue goes nowhere at points.
Well,
it's like
dialogue-driven in terms of, like that's sort of how you get the story, interactions between characters.
I mean, it is dialogue heavy.
Yeah,
but a lot of the dialogue is just like it's just too much.
Yeah, the dialogue drives the story. So, like, if you're into stories that are sort of told that way, I think you'll like it. However, be aware that there's a lot of it and it's fast. Yeah, that's kind of my final thoughts. I like it. I recommend it, but I don't like it enough that I'll revisit it. I don't think.
Yeah, I do recommend watching it at least once, but at the same time, it's not something. I mean, we were halfway through and we took a quick break and we watched what felt like another 20, 30 minutes. Like 10 minutes had gone by at the most, and we're like, I'm kind of ready for this to be over.
Yeah, there were moments where I felt like there was just so much exposition, and I was like, okay, like where is this taking us? Where are we going? What's really on the line here? What's the conflict? I mean, the movie's not like necessarily vague about it. It does tell you, but it feels like it takes a minute to really get there.
Yeah, I mean, I do.
Which is never a bad thing if it's done well, and it's not that this is done bad, but it's it's sort of got those negatives that come along with just presenting a movie this way.
I do recommend it. I just like you though. I can't see myself going back and watching it again. Like I wouldn't. It's definitely not one I'm going to seek out. If it was on TV, nothing else is on, I might would put it back on. But it's just, it did not hold me enough, and I don't know. I feel like there was more story to be told with this amount of time.
Yeah, I think there was almost like just too much story. I would have rather it just focused more on Michael Keaton's character and not worried about going off in these other directions as much as it did.
So, final rating. I'll let you go first this time.
I'll give it, I want to say a 5.5 or a 6.
I was going to say a 6. Maybe I might go up as high as 6.5 just because of the acting and Michael Keaton's story himself.
Yeah,
but
Keaton's performance anyway is just good. He's never bad.
I feel like this could possibly be our lowest rated film. Honestly,
I think it is. I mean, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm just gonna give it a 6 just to be final.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say 6.
I'll say that too. I will say of all the movies we have watched, I mean, these are not even comparable. I think I enjoyed this a little more than Hereditary.
Yeah, I mean,
but I could see myself going back and watching Hereditary again.
Yeah, and I think I said in the review, I would go back and rewatch Hereditary just for the sake of understanding it better. And this, I don't feel like I completely understand it, but
And these are not movies to compare by any means.
No.
We're just saying
yeah.
The few that we have reviewed so far, this is just where we're at right now with that.
Yeah.
So, I guess we're both at a 6 on that.
And I'll be honest, I think 6 is being generous. But
quite possibly.
I'll say 6. Mostly just for acting, Keaton especially, and the cinematography was beautiful. I would take certain sequences or certain shots out of this movie to show to people, just say, hey, like, look how good this looks.
Absolutely.
That I want to make my film look like that. So it's definitely got those positives. I might be being a bit generous, but I'd say a 6. However, I wouldn't watch it again.
Yeah. But we do recommend watching it.
Definitely, yeah.
At least once.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, like I said, you like Keaton. You like these sorts of stories that are told this way. You'll like it. You probably maybe like it more than us. But I would suggest if you're a film fan, especially of these actors, this type of storytelling, watch it one time. But we're just not going to watch it again. Yeah.
So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Midnite Movie Reviews. Please, if you're new to the channel, subscribe. And if you haven't seen it yet, check out the latest episode of On the Road with Vincent. Raven had guest starred where we visited cabin fever filming locations.
Yes, we did.
And he will be on a future episode as well that we have started filming, but that's going to be a little more down the road, a little creepier episode with that one. And again, stay tuned for more content, more Midnite Movie Reviews on the road with Vincent, and of course, Smoking Hours with myself and Stephen Midnight.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Well, stay tuned to Midnight Massacre news in general here in the next little bit. We got some pretty cool announcements coming up soon. So
absolutely. Yeah,
check out stay on the band page, the Facebook page, the Instagram page. Keep checking him out on YouTube. We got more of these movie reviews coming, and he's always doing something. So I guess that's it for me.
All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you all again next time.